Well, the traveling guy is now in what he claims to be maybe one of the most beautiful places on the planet. I understand, Larry, that you are currently in Yosemite.
That's right. And I'm sitting in the one spot I've been able to find with any Wi-Fi connection.
so, yeah. So therefore, Starlink is in your future. What do you call it? One of these new, smaller, more portable Starlinks.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna upgrade to that as soon as it becomes available. I could have, I could have signed up for the traveling Starlink, but and actually in my X that would have been it would have been possible to travel with it. But for sure now, I'm addicted now to this road trip thing. So I'm going to be doing far more of it. So I'm going to go ahead and get that dish because, we're here bang slap in the middle of Yosemite. The hotel give you what they call Wi-Fi. It's about 120 kilobits per second.
Yeah.
It, it can't do speech and it can't do video.
Yeah. Hey, I've been in hotels in Las Vegas where I couldn't get signal. So, all right. Well, Larry, you were telling me, of course, you're from South Africa originally, and you were telling me that when you were roughly in your senior year of high school, you did an exchange and you came over here with about 60 other students. And one of those individuals you've stayed friends with for years and years and years, and got a chance to visit the other day. And
Right.
She's in California, or where? What state?
Yeah, she's in California.
In,
She's, in the wine country.
in the wine
And
country. So she,
in the wine country. And she lives in, a beautiful little village. I don't want to say where, but she lives, it's a very, very pretty part of the world. And, she's been there for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
Or more, actually. What am I talking about? Probably. Anyway, she's been there a long time. My wife and I have known her for years and years and years, and she's a successful author, actually. Anyway, we spent a very pleasant evening together, at the end of which I walked her to a car, which happened to be a Mercedes-Benz. Now, we had discussed Elon during our meeting. How can I not? And she had trotted out all the tropes about Elon, and I had to, gently nudge her in the right direction, talk about it. Being South African, she also had, some interest in the subject. But when we walked to the car, I said, Mercedes. She said, yeah. She said, tell me about these electric cars. Don't you have to charge them all the time when you travel? How does that work? So I had to walk her through the whole bit about the travel, and then about the batteries catching on fire. And then she said, but, I'm not sure I can do this because, what happens if the fires come and I had to go through that as well. And I told her about some of the important escapes that people with electric cars had, in the hurricanes in Florida, and how it had been so helpful to have the electric car. So she said, yeah, I got to get rid of this Mercedes. And so, I was ready to trot out my,
you're
my referral code. So,
yeah.
but I mean, I tell the story because, we just heard Rob talk about these, these crazy ideas people have about charging and all the other, tropes about electric vehicles in general, but more particularly, Tesla. And I watched the changes, in her facial expressions and so when we left, I was pretty sure that she was going to do the research.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure the research will present some of the negative aspects, but of course, many of the positives, or many of the negative lies, actually, and most of the positive aspects. So I think that Rob is right, and in general, the community is right. We have to do a lot more publicity, whether it's by way of advertising or whether it's by way of other forms of promotion. it's critical because people, a very high percentage of the buying of the people in the demographic that would buy Teslas, even in the state of California, in Northern California, haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, it is rather amazing. But then you have a situation just last week where the Secretary of Transportation, or I forget what her exact title was, but a very high up individual in the Biden administration takes this road trip to see about the difficulties of charging electric cars and only takes non-Teslas and only stops in non-Tesla charging situations. So of course the headlines are, well, it's really hard to get your electric car charged. Well, I don't know how that helped the Biden administration, who's trying to get people to go to electric cars. I don't know how it helped any of the car companies that are making electric cars. And I don't understand why the continued nonsense from this administration of not being willing to show any evidence of recognizing the most American-made car.
Yeah, and I was going to respond to that, and I will respond to that. The trouble is I'm traveling, and this happens to be a particular, I'm with my wife now, and we're really focused on trying to absorb all that we can see here, which is quite something. And we're in a hotel in one of the most beautiful spots in all the world, actually, right in the valley, leading up to the gates of the park, on a river. It's just some of the most beautiful. It's very beautiful. Anyway, I am intending to respond to that because road tripping in a Tesla has to be one of the world's great delights. I mean, as I said, I'm addicted. I'm ready to travel the next 10 years in this test, just seeing the world. And FSD is amazing. I'm going to write a piece about FSD, but I think I told you I've got three. I was struck out of my FSD.
Yeah, you struck out. Yeah.
And not on this trip, but cumulatively over the last X months. But I only had 2 strikes left when I got on the trip, and unfortunately I used them up. But another couple of days I'll have it back again. But I have to say, autopilot does pretty damn good.
Yeah,
you have to pay more attention, even on the freeway, but it does pretty darn good. I'm wondering if the take-up on autopilot is a little bit lower than it could be if they didn't make take-up on FSD isn't that good if they would just lower the bar on autopilot, lower the capabilities of autopilot a little bit.
Yeah, entirely possible. I think the uptake on FSD will be huge once it's 100% there. I think folks, I mean, that'll be another one of these word of mouth things that'll happen very, very quickly, I think, especially within the community. But the whole matter of educating the public, obviously, this is a big deal on X. Everybody talks about it all the time. Of course, Gary Black being the leading proponent of spending at least hundreds of millions on advertising. And I'm a marketing guy. That's what I've done my whole life. I am certainly somebody who believes in marketing and believes that there is almost 100% chance that the advertising money that we spent, if it was spent halfway smart, would have a good ROI. I mean, the product is outstanding, and you only need to change minds a little bit in this particular case, as you just pointed out. There's a few tropes, there's a few pieces of misinformation that once you get somebody to understand that they're just completely wrong on those issues, all of a sudden the opportunity, the idea, it can be a quick change, as opposed to trying to convince somebody about multiple aspects of some car where most of it's emotional anyway. You're only trying to change 1 or 2 little misperceptions.
That's so true. That's so true. And I'm not one, I'm not one to encourage advertising. I will say that Elon Musk has built 4 models, each of which are extraordinarily successful in their category, far in excess of any other car that has been built in any category in terms of time to market penetration. I mean, the Y has reached, a level of success never seen before. And even the 3 reached kind of, what every industry analysts thought was going to be the limit of their sales ability. So it's so true to say that the product really sells the product. And Elon is right in that respect. But we are talking about mass adoption of a major change in behavior. And we have had all of these tropes evolve,
Yes,
which is indicative of 2 things. One, the failure of the competitive models, because they fail to understand the whole ecosystem required to support the vehicle, because the vehicle design is not the design of the 4 wheels and the body that goes around it and all the features in it. It's the entire support system in terms of, the 0 dealerships, the online experience, and the charging system. And so he's done a magnificent job of convincing people to an extent that more people are buying that car than any other model in its category. Each car than almost any other model in its category, depending on how you rate his category.
Right.
Such a strange combination of categories, because he didn't pay attention to the standard categories or the standard breakdown of the market, blah, 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 as Gary would have had him do as a product manager, as a brand manager. But all of that said, but there's no doubt that there's education to be done. And education can be done in several ways, but the fact that there are so many people who still need educating indicates that there has to be, more effort, and the more effort, can be advertising, it can be, an education program of some sort. It could be done in many ways, but it could be using multiple channels, all reinforcing one another in order to achieve the goal.
Yeah. Now, Gary, on the opposite side, famously has been saying over and over again, with something which I think is pretty obvious, that the Cybertruck will become a massive traveling billboard that will attract people to the brand in general, because you cannot not see it when it's going down the highway.
That's true. And it was true of the 3 as well, by the way. It was true of each model, but the 3 was sold in such numbers that it became true of the 3. When a Tesla comes down the road, you notice it because its design is unique and very specific. The Cybertruck takes that to the ultimate limit.
Yeah, so I think that there's going to, and of course, it also brings it to the attention of an entirely new group of people. So if you're a truck driver, you couldn't care anything about sedans or SUVs. You'd look down your nose at those, so that group hasn't even paid the slightest bit of attention to the entire thing. Then you've got this other group, which I talk about all the time, which is the Midwestern conservative. They haven't paid any attention either, because they have a general inclination to not be in favor of anything that appears to be green or being forced upon them as green. And so there's a resistance. Before you even get to the details of whether the car works well or not, there's this resistance to the idea that I'm going to be forced to buy an electric car and give up my gas car. It has nothing to do with anything other than an emotionally charged response. Elon has, in my opinion, correctly categorized the product as being environmentally friendly, as opposed to anything about CO2. And he's also talked about it in terms of being something that's sustainable, a sustainable energy source, because we can all agree that oil and gas, yeah, they might outlive our grandchildren and even our great-grandchildren, but at some point you run out of oil and gas. So by couching it in those terms, rather than in the great crisis that some purport to believe in terms of the end of the world, or the end of the world as we know it because of CO2, I think he's been wise to keep it in that grouping. But that group is the ones that, if I was advertising, I'd be spending all my money on the Midwest, and I'd be showing I'd be pointing out that it's just a practically good decision to make for your family in terms of safety, and that will get you a huge percentage of them is just by the safety aspects. And then you go from there to the savings on gasoline and to the amazing performance. And that's another group of people that love performance, like me.
Yeah, but it's also the most, it's the ultimate looking vehicle. I mean, you drive that car, you're the boss. I think that appeals to the Midwest.
Yeah. Oh no, I think there's lots of ways to appeal to the Midwest, but I think there's an additional barrier, is what I'm trying to say. It's not just, will I be able to get to my destination? It's not just, will the battery catch on fire in my garage? All those kinds of things, those are fairly easily dealt with, I think. But you do have to overcome this resistance to the greening part of it. And I think that's fairly easy. I don't think it's a hard job. Now, I've also said there's a real possibility that the advertising hasn't started up till now, because they were already, until 8 months ago, they were selling every vehicle they could possibly make, and they had backlog, and they were raising prices in order to take care of the problem of not having enough vehicles. But I don't think that's true for the next 6 to 9 months. So I think I'd like to see Elon start advertising now.
Well, I was at the forum where they asked him to advertise, and he said he would.
Yep.
I don't see it happening yet.
Oh, well, there's been 3 different ways. Okay. They have done, what do you call it? Pay-per-click advertising on Google. So there's apparently now at least hundreds of different pay-per-click ads on Google, taking people to the website. You've got 3 now shows, or well, 2, I guess, because they didn't end up at Detroit, but they've had 2 motor shows that they haven't been in at least in years, if ever. And so there's 2 additional places where they've been advertising. But they were in that English, that show in, was it in England, Germany? They were in that German show. And they were in it was a smaller show up in Canada, not in Canada, the Northwest. I can't remember now, but recently, like within the last couple of weeks.
They've been in China before. They've been in shows in China.
Well, they've been advertising a little bit in China, actually, for years. So it's a little different over there in terms of their approach. But okay, so what else? So we had the market down today, Larry. Everybody's mad at me because yesterday I said we would never see 255 again. And now we're at 2. Well, I don't know how we ended up here, but we didn't end up anywhere close to 255.
I saw you saying that, and I thought to myself, I wouldn't have gone there. I mean, this market is not, Mr. Market is not a happy guy right now. He is not a happy guy. He's a very sad guy. So I would be very, very cautious if you're trying to make a little bit of money now. I would be very, very cautious. Life, I mean, people are losing confidence in this Fed. They're certainly not believing what Fed is saying. I think, there's real concern about bonds, real
Yes.
concern about bonds, and a real concern about debt. The markets in the look. Having said that, it could go up next week because suddenly, the CPE looks really good.
Right.
But I would be very, very hesitant at this point calling the market in any direction at all.
Yeah, apparently today might have been due to another report talking about that the numbers on the 2nd of October are not going to be that great. And so that maybe was the first time that the street was hearing it, because they're still sitting at 266. I'm sorry, 466. So this may be the first time that the street recognized, or let's say that the broad number of people that are playing in the Tesla pool really got it, that the numbers really are not going to be good on October 2nd. And mixed into that article that came out was not the contrary, which is that the same people that are predicting the low numbers on October 2nd are predicting record-breaking by a lot numbers on January 2nd. So when you take those two together, the market should not necessarily have been down, but that news seems to be the compelling issue of today that caused the stock to drop. So now that number apparently is baked in.
I am very skeptical of these indicators, and I think that macro is a much more complex combination of multiple issues. This may have been one of them. But look, the market right now, it's not just Tesla.
Oh, yeah.
If you look across the market, there are a lot of counters that have done quite well recently that are struggling and are down. So there's a general realization that, or a general consensus that we're heading in a less than great direction. I think the market feels as I do that this Fed has gone too far, and the kind of cajoling that the chairman did in his statement last time was not helpful. They were looking for some relief. They were looking for him to say, "Good job, guys. We're going in the right direction." And he said, "Well, it was a kind of good job, but actually it's not so good." And so that's why I was so angry, and I remain, convinced that he's heading us for a recession.
Yeah. So if the PCE next Wednesday is better, or actually right now, most people are expecting it to be fairly good. The street average, the economists that they poll are suggesting that it's going to be down another 0.3, I think, compared to last time, which would certainly be good news.
But we both know that measure is so inaccurate, and it is so it so lacks granularity that the difference between being down 0.3 and 0.1, or even being up 0.1, it can happen for random reasons, and then the market could take a further tumble down. So these are, and the market knows that. So these are very difficult days for the market, and these are very difficult days, for Tesla. Tesla's actually, got a pretty significant beta. I think it's about 1.5. So any move in the market, Tesla's going to move, that much further. So anybody buying in the short term now for expecting either an uptick or, not too far a downtick, dangerous territory.
Dangerous territory. So Larry, what about Cybertruck? We still don't have an announcement.
That's key. That's key, and it's going to be October. I'm convinced
Well,
it's going to be.
yeah, I think we can be pretty confident that unless Elon's going to have a surprise party, there's always that possibility. He just calls everybody and says, "Be here next Saturday." But you usually get a bigger turnout at a surprise party. You knew that, Larry.
Yeah, yeah. It could happen. I don't think so. Look, regulators have a vote in this in terms of actual sales taking place.
Yeah.
We don't know what's happening at the regulatory level. I must say that I was very, very disappointed to see that Fish and Wildlife Services haven't even begun to assess the situation at Boca Chica. Yeah, and that indicates to me that, either this administration is purposely influencing it, or it's just another sign of our bureaucrats not giving a continental. And it could be the same situation in terms of getting the Cybertruck on the road. We don't know.
Right.
But, I'm told confidently it's October, and so I'm confident it's going to be October.
Yeah, and I've heard rumors of the same thing that are apparently coming from well-placed sources, that it is the end of October, last week of October. So hopefully that's true. And then the announcement, usually you want to give people 4 weeks advance notice. So that might mean we get that announcement this week. And that could be, even the announcement could be a catalyst, although I'm sure you've heard me say before, I see it as being a running catalyst as each stage takes place. And maybe the most important catalyst of all being the first third-party review. That's the one I'm really looking for, is the first significant auto publication, online or offline, I don't care who drives it, and gives a great review.
I'm a little bit more skeptical of those first reviews. I think that it's going to be the rate of ramp, and I think it's going to be a relatively slow ramp by definition, complete new build type.
Yep, yep.
So I see it being a long burn rather than a short burn. I see it going through the first 2 quarters of next year. So I'm very bullish for next year, but I'm not anywhere near as bullish as you are about the rest of this year. I'm bullish that we'll get a good bump at the announcement and at the actual delivery, but the delivery is going to be 30 vehicles to staff, and then wait and wait and wait, and then the deliveries to the customers begin. And at that point, I think we'll see some real things happen. But you're right. I mean, from those first deliveries, we could get a review. We could.
So, Larry, the other one that's been bugging me this week has been the statement by Elon. It might have been in the book. I don't think it was in the book, but somewhere along the line, there was a statement made that the Model 3 Highland was an easy changeover because there was no major structural changes, that the Model 3 changeover was easy. Before that statement was made, I actually said that because I couldn't see what the big deal was. I mean, there's a 50% of the items on the car have been changed, but I didn't see what where there was a significant amount of factory changeover necessary. Having said that,
you said it to me in one of our conversations on this show. So yeah, I think you're absolutely on target. I agree with you.
So do you think it's supply chain that's slowing up the changeover here in the United States and also the changeover of the Model Y? Is it just a matter of ramping up those new products that go into all those 50% of the things that got changed require every one of them has their own supply chain? You think that, because otherwise, why wouldn't you just switch over right now? I mean, as fast as you possibly could.
Well, you still got to change. I mean, in Shanghai, it took them, at least 10 days or 15 days to do the changeover. I think the changeover is going to happen in Fremont pretty automatically, but I think they're still going through the regulatory hurdles and approvals. You know, it has to get the same regulatory
Oh, I see.
approval.
Yeah.
So I think that's the holdup rather than the manufacturing.
Huh.
So I don't want to, you know, I don't have any specific information that I could say this and that. But that's my view.
And we did get at least one more piece of nice information. This is, of course, Good News Friday. So we did get the approval of Mexico. They got their basic environmental approval today, although I guess there's a bunch of smaller approvals that are necessary, but the big one they got. So
paid the big amount, and now they have to pay the small. I shouldn't say that. I really should. Look, it's Good News Friday. Yes, it's all going to work, and it'll happen. Yeah, I mean, clearly the focus is going to be, you know, in Texas, and I think we have to see that happen. Now, you know, on Bad News Friday, there is, of course, the SEC investigation of the perks.
yeah.
By the way, what we haven't discussed yet is the book, Walter Isaacson's book, and I'm almost finished it.
Okay.
Have you finished it?
Oh, yes, I finished it. Yeah, I finished it. Yeah, I did it in 3 days. I promised my audience that I would run through it quickly so that I could report back. So
yeah. So we should have a session and talk about it. You have reported back on it. I haven't, but we should have a conversation. I think there are quite a lot of interesting reflections we can share, or I can share with you.
Sure. Now, on the SEC investigation, I did mention the other day on one of my programs that it seems to me that you and I might have talked about this for a second the other day. I think we might have. That yes, there are bookkeeping issues. You said your own companies, you had multiple companies, and you had to make sure that things got accounted for properly. I had multiple companies. We were always trying to make sure that there was arm's length contracts, that there was something written down, that you could point to the accounting and say, this is how the company paid, you know, for this particular thing, as opposed to just letting it slide. And sure, and I know about my companies, things did slide from time to time. But now you're talking about much larger companies with much larger dollars involved and much larger public companies.
That makes a huge difference.
Right, huge difference. And so letting things slide would not be good. Do you think the SEC is concerned about minor accounting issues and letting the occasional thing slide, or do you think this is just that they have to because people have come to them and said, hey, it looks like there's something going on?
Neither.
Okay.
I think this is a highly politicized SEC, and I'm going to say, you know, what a lot of people would argue about, but I think that in general, regulation and
judicial
arms of justice, not just the judiciary.
Yeah.
It's not just the Justice Department. It's also all the administrative judges.
Yes.
All of them have become highly politicized. It is the gravest danger this republic faces. I saw this happen in South Africa. It didn't end well. It has happened here. It isn't how politicized our politicians have become or how, you know, extreme they've become. It is that every level of federal and state governments have become politicized. And it's now normal to operate at a political level in these administrations. And when the public service becomes politicized, you face extreme danger. And I don't know which government in history has been able to resurrect itself from that danger.
Yeah.
I take it seriously.
I just read an article just before we came on, actually, that was talking about this very thing. And Larry, I just add a couple of thoughts to what from the article about what you're talking about. 95% of the federal employees who have given money to a political party have given it to the Democratic Party. Only 5%
Right.
to the Republicans.
I've read that, and it's open sourced, but it's not just at the federal level. So at the state, and it's not just the Democrat, it's not just the left. In the federal government, it happens to be left leaning, but there are states that are right leaning, where
sure.
you find the same level, the exact same level of political activity or political bias at levels of state government and of local governments. So, yeah, the point is that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, when I first came to this country, that would never have been effaced. I mean, Republicans sat on the committee that sought to indict Richard Nixon.
Yes.
And voted, with the majority. That would never happen today. I mean, famously said he could shoot somebody in the street in New York City. I mean, I believe that, by the way. I believe that Biden could shoot somebody in the street in Washington, D.C., and he wouldn't be indicted.
Yeah, I think, or the opposite, be indicted for things that are completely nonsense.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And so every level of the government has become political. And, the question is, has the Supreme Court become political? Well, it's always been political in the sense that you've always had a majority that has moved one way, the Warren Court famously, and through, from the late 50s, well, actually, from the 30s all the way, no, from the 50s, all the way through the 80s, all the way to the 80s, was, left-leaning, and then you had right-leaning, and then so, I mean, that's been the case actually since the Union,
right.
Since
of course.
Yes. But it has been my observation that the civil administration, that the functionaries have not been that way. But now it's no longer the case, and I think that's a grave danger. And the problem is that the administrative courts, firstly, the bureaucracy has accrued such power. They get the power not only to implement the laws, but they get the power to interpret the laws.
Yeah, wildly.
Yeah, they interpret the laws. They're tasked with interpreting the laws. They interpret the laws, and they can evolve the laws, and they do evolve the laws, and it's a grave danger. Anyway, I got to get off my political soapbox, because it's not what we're supposed to be talking about.
Well, actually, Larry, somebody complimented me the other day. I was like, by the way, we love your comments. We want you to comment, and the best comments are always the compliments, right, Larry?
Well,
anyway, but somebody said,
story.
But somebody said in the channel, that the difference maybe in this channel is that we try to look at the subjects broadly. The stock doesn't move just because of technical issues. It doesn't move just because of fundamental issues. It doesn't move just because of economic issues. It doesn't move just because of stock market issues, if you will, and the way that the street is thinking. It doesn't move just because of the retail buyers and sellers and how many of them are out there and what they're thinking at any given time. It moves for all of the above. It is a huge mess. And yes, I make predictions Sometimes I try to get Larry to make predictions. He's not nearly as inclined to do that, but he's made a few here. And
to make long-term predictions.
Long-term, yes, you've made long-term predictions on the show. And the predictions that I'm making are, as I've said so many times before, they're mostly just fun and ways to evaluate the analysis. So here's my analysis. Here's the number I come up with based on the analysis. Now, if we don't hit the number, when I say we're going to hit the number, where was the analysis wrong, or what new information came in to change the analysis? That is the way that projecting things is supposed to work. It's all about the underlying analysis, not whether you're actually right or wrong.
Well, Gordon Johnson never comes back and tells us why he's wrong. But I will make a projection.
Okay.
Okay. And my projection is very simple. The production and sales announcement at the end of this month is going to have a really negative impact on the stock price.
Okay.
Really negative.
It's not baked in. Today didn't do it.
No.
Okay. So it's got further to drop when the numbers actually come in on the 2nd. Now,
and I regard that as a huge opportunity.
Now, between now and the 2nd, though, we're likely to get the catalyst. We're likely to get the catalyst of the Cybertruck announcement. Do you expect that to be offsetting?
No, I think it won't be offsetting because the sentiment is always very strong at the outset, at the announcement point, at the point of the announcement. The sentiment always, whatever the state of the market is at that point, the sentiment at that moment drives it down because of the options action. So,
well,
that's what I think.
Generally speaking, Larry, I think the one thing that I've claimed over and over again that I'm going to be 100% right on all of the time with regard to making these projections is that Tesla stock will be up and it will be down.
I think you're 100% accurate, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. So yeah. All right, Randy.
All right. Well, hey, it's great as always, Larry, and keep us informed from the road. Let me know if there's something very, very hot that you want to talk about next week, and we'll get you back on here. But as always, Larry's going to be here on Friday night to help me talk about Good News Friday. Thanks, Larry, for being on.
Take care, Andy.
All of you out there, it has been great talking to you.